It's really great coming to events like this and meeting lots of new people. But there's always this one question people ask me when I'm getting to know them. They say, "So, where are you from?" Well, my dad was born and raised here in Brisbane, and my mum is from Penang in Malaysia. Like my dad, I was born and raised locally, and now I'm about to start my PhD looking at food media and how it can influence our relationship with food. Now, if you've ever been to Malaysia, you're probably sitting there thinking, "Oh man, your mum must have cooked you the best food when you were growing up." Yeah? No. Think of this, all the Asian ladies in the world, and the one who's my mum doesn't like cooking. So it wasn't until I travelled to Malaysia, about 6 years ago now, that I was able to really start to understand and experience the rich food culture of that part of my family. But then fast forward a few years to 2012, and I was just starting out on my research journey. We were asked to think about who we are as a researcher. And this is where I started to join the dots between that trip to Malaysia, my lifelong fascination with cooking shows, and my desire to make these shows the focus of my research. My theory is that my love of cooking shows must be a form of compensation. A form of compensation for the fact that my food-crazed family I grew up so far away from my food-crazed family. So, visiting them was a massive culture shock for me. You know, we'd sit down to one meal, and they'd already be talking about what they want to eat at the next one. And we could go out to hawker food courts like this at midnight, and the place would still be packed. But what could you get at midnight in Australia? Cheeseburger, a kebab. So having had these experiences while growing up, and now researching food media and food culture, it's becoming increasingly apparent that in order for young Australians to truly thrive and prosper, we need to be more mindful about our relationship with food. Because it seems no matter where you turn, someone else is saying, "I've got the ideal approach to food, I've got the ideal approach to eating." And these ideas might be based on health, about making a social statement, a political statement. It might just be about trying to project a certain image of yourself through what you eat. So we're taking in all of these messages, right? But how are we actually responding to them? How are we responding to them in our supermarkets, in our kitchens, and at our dinner tables? I was standing in the freezer aisle of a local supermarket with one of my research participants, and she stopped and she looked at me. She said, "You know what, I never really thought about all this stuff that I buy until now I've got you standing here asking me about it." And that's just it, isn't it? We're so busy that shopping, cooking, and eating, it becomes habit, it becomes instinct. And that's kind of scary. Because eating is one of the most important things that we can do every day to live and function, yet we treat it like another chore that we don't want to think about. So, the conversation I want to create with you today is about food lifestyles. What is your food lifestyle? Now, starting this conversation about food lifestyles is really important to my idea of the new Australian dream, because as our population grows to an estimated 46 million by the year 2075, what we're eating is either going to keep us healthy or place more strain on our health system. But health is only one influence over our food lifestyle. Think about this. Do you consider yourself a sophisticated foodie who enjoys fine dining restaurants? Maybe you enjoy a green smoothie in the morning before you head off to the gym. Perhaps it's easier to just pick up fish and chips on the way home from work. Or maybe you're one of those lucky people who can still sit down for Sunday roast with their family. But you might be sitting there thinking, "Well, I don't fit into one clear food lifestyle." Or you might be thinking, "Well, I don't know what the right food lifestyle is." And it's no wonder. Let me give you an example. So in the last year, there's been a lot of debate in the media about the consumption of sugar. About this time last year, Sarah Wilson released this book, I Quit Sugar. And as the title suggests, Wilson touts the benefits of a completely sugar-free diet. As part of her 8-week program, she even recommends that participants don't eat fruit for 6 of those weeks. But then, in November of last year, a nutritionist named Cassie Platt released this book, Don't Quit Sugar. But wait, there's more. You might recall stories in the news about the lifestyles of Australian fast bowler Peter Siddle and blogger Lonnie Jane Anthony. And as you can see here, they both embrace a fruit-filled diet. And it was reported that they eat more than 10 bananas a day. So with all of these conflicting messages out there, it's no wonder we're confused. But like I said before, health is only one influence over our food lifestyle. Gourmet food and fine dining is another popular trend. The research I conducted with people who watch cooking shows led me to establish this idea of the everyday foodie. I found that food media has influenced us to expand our culinary horizons. It has made us more discerning about what we eat and more knowledgeable about chefs and restaurants. Now, everyday foodies aren't necessarily your typical middle-class foodies, but watching cooking shows has opened our eyes to this new lifestyle that we see as desirable. So while we may not be at the farmers markets every weekend, or we may not have hundreds of dollars to spend at fancy restaurants, we're attempting to embrace this foodie lifestyle. So, we're getting food messages through our phones, from magazines, through our tablets, from the newspaper, from cookbooks, and on television. And there are two key reasons why being aware of all these food messages and all these food trends is important to the new Australian dream. Firstly, food is linked to almost every other aspect of life. And first and foremost, food is about health and survival. In some countries, we know that they don't have enough to eat. But here, we've got too much. In 1995, the Australian Bureau of Statistics reported that 56.3% of Australians were overweight or obese. A little over 15 years later, that figure reached 63.4%. But then, if you want to start talking about the causes of obesity, that tends to lead to a discussion about socioeconomic status and class. But I'll come back to this food-money relationship later. As I discussed earlier, my time in Penang opened my eyes to the fact that food is so strongly linked with culture. My supervisor, Jason, pointed out to me that food is this wonderful vehicle through which migrants have gained a level of acceptance after moving to Australia. He likes to start telling me these stories, and they begin with the phrase, "when I was a boy." And when Jason was a boy, growing up in the 1980s, he said that garlic was still considered an exotic ingredient. He said that spaghetti bolognese, which is my favourite meal, was also still considered exotic. I'm not sure that we truly embrace multiculturalism yet, but I know that we certainly appreciate international cuisine. At my local shopping centre, in the food court, the only outlet that's been there for all of my 22 years, apart from the McDonald's and the Carvery, is the good old Chinese takeaway. And that same family have owned it for all of these years. But who knows what Australia's menu will look like in another 22 years, or in another 61 years when we're expected to reach that 46 million population figure. The second reason we need to be mindful about our relationship with food is because it's one that carries with it many contradictions. I was interviewing a family about their food habits, and the teenage daughter said to me, "Oh, I'm on a milkshake diet because I'm trying to lose some weight." And I said, "Okay, fair enough." But as the interview went on, she started to make exceptions. Her mum was going to make her these ham and cheese scrolls that she was going to take to work for lunch, but then she was going back on the shakes. And then throughout the interview, I noticed that other members of the family were poking fun at her for eating Doritos. But you know what? We all do that kind of thing. I know one day I'll be at, oh yeah, I'm on a health kick, but then the next day I suddenly appear at the fast food drive-thru. Another thing we need to do is start questioning popular wisdom and generalisations about food. And I'm coming back now to that idea of food, money and class. I've seen parents walking their kids to school with a paper bag with their breakfast in it and the golden arches that put it on the side. And at first I sympathised with them. I was following that, that thinking that, well, fast food's always just cheaper, easier. But is it? I bought this serve of hotcakes and a hash brown from said fast food restaurant. That cost me $6.50. That same morning I went to a fruit shop and I got this tub of organic yogurt, a mango and a banana for $6.55. Okay, so at this point, the fruit shop is still a bit more expensive. But if I want an orange juice with my fast food meal, hello, that's $7.40. So that old argument that fast food is always cheaper doesn't necessarily add up. So, while we've got government, nutritionists, dietitians, and celebrity chefs saying, cook this, eat that, dine at this restaurant, buy produce from these markets, I think it's time that we stop for some careful reflection. We need to think about what we eat, question why we eat it, and then we need to learn more about food before we try and change anything. Because trying to define our approach to food is so difficult. Food is about so much more than just what you eat. It's about our families, our culture, it's about our standing in society, and of course, it's about our health. With so many claims out there to have found the perfect food lifestyle, I think it's time that we just chew a little bit more slowly and we think about what we eat and why we eat it. Now, as a researcher, I don't necessarily create in the same way that some of our other speakers do, but what I want to create with you today is the beginning of a conversation, a really important conversation about our nation's food culture. So for all of you in the audience and all our friends watching online, let's carry on this conversation. Let's talk about food. What's in your fridge right now? Why did you buy those items? What is your food lifestyle?